Hi, welcome to the 14-day weather forecast. Colder conditions have now returned to all parts of the UK, but are they here to stay? Well, there is a lot to discuss, so without further ado, I'll begin by taking a look at the view across Europe and the North Atlantic. The animation runs from 18 GMT, Tuesday, March the 7th. At the outset, Arctic air is moving down across all parts of the United Kingdom. The white shading in the north indicates snow showers, but it's to the southwest that I think we need to be looking because there's milder air, outbreaks of rain, and in the short term, those push northeastwards, track across southern Britain, bump into the cold air, and turn to sleet or snow. There is some uncertainty about their northern extent and just how much snow will be falling, but I will take a look in a little bit more detail later. They move away and then more systems push in from the Atlantic and they take more of a northerly track. That means milder air returns into southern and central counties, so snow turns back to rain. It could also become quite windy. You can see the tightly packed isobars here. But in the north, heavy and disruptive snow is expected. Some really large accumulations are quite possible, and I'm going to look at that a little bit later as well. In the days which follow, it's a changeable or unsettled pitch. The colder air may return southwards for a short time, but further Atlantic disturbances move across the UK, bringing rain to much of the country. But in the north, it could still be cold enough for snow at times. And this animation finishes Wednesday, the 15th of March. Another area of cloud and rain moving eastwards, but in Scotland, there's still some snow falling. So lots of weather taking place through the first week. The air temperature sequence helps explain things quite well. It begins at the same time. The blue and purple shading here indicates very cold air. It's covering all parts of the UK, but the greens, yellows and oranges to the southwest are the milder air. As I run this, the trend is for that milder air to move northwards progressively through the week. At times, the colder air could push back south, but finishing here, Wednesday the 15th of March, the dark blue shading is to the northeast of the UK, and it's really an Atlantic influence which is dominating things. So still quite cold, as I mentioned there, potentially in Scotland, but further south and southwest, it's a milder picture. What that means in terms of temperatures down at the ground level, here are some charts to illustrate. So beginning on Wednesday, the 8th of March, forecast maximums in the afternoon. It's very cold across all parts of the UK. In the south here, where we've got the sleet and snow, temperatures are just hovering around freezing point. But it's important to look just a little bit further south into the English Channel in northern France, because here the yellow shading is showing the mild air, values into double figures and perhaps just pushing into Cornwall as well. And if that all moves just a little bit further northwards, the snow in the south falls as rain. Very fine margins. This is a global model, so an adjustment of 100 miles north is absolutely nothing at all, hence some of the uncertainty. Going forwards to Thursday, the trend in southern and central regions is for temperatures to be a little bit higher, particularly in the southwest, but it's still very cold across the north, and that's where the heavy snow is falling. Going forwards to Friday afternoon, a similar story, remaining very cold in Scotland, perhaps northern England too, Northern Ireland as well, still staying on the chilly side. And there are some very low overnight temperatures being forecast through the first week, especially in the northern half of the UK. As an example, here are forecast minimums at 06 GMT, Sunday the 12th. -11 in Scotland there, -10 in the borders and even in parts of northern England. It's still very cold. Less cold though in central and southern counties. So the risk of frost also retreating northwards through the course of the week, though as I suggested, there is that possibility of colder air returning briefly southwards at times. 15 GMT, Sunday afternoon, Sunday the 12th, so in the afternoon, forecast maximums. It's mild across southern and central regions, Northern Ireland by this point, but it's staying cold there in the north. And by Tuesday, it's a similar story. Still quite cold in Scotland, especially the northern half where there's that chance of snow. But as you head southwards, temperatures are increasing, so double figures in much of southern Britain. Lots taking place there in terms of temperatures, and I think the MOGREPS-G ensemble plots help to clarify a little bit. This one's for London. Cold in the short term, but a sharp upwards spike here, indicating much milder conditions by the 9th of March. There is quite a big spread there, though, so there is some uncertainty. A few of the runs are keeping it colder, hence the uncertainty about how that mild air is going to be progressing northwards. And for a time, as I hinted, it could turn colder again briefly, so around the 11th. But then towards the end there, temperatures climbing once more. Comparing it to Inverness to see what's going on in the north, colder through the early part of the week, and it probably stays cold for much of the time. By the 12th, there's a big spread developing here too, suggesting that the milder air may be reaching the northern half of Scotland towards the end of the first week. Also, strong winds are a possibility, something else to look out for. The MOGREPS-G plot here shows forecast gust speeds for Cardiff, and around the 10th, the 11th of March, a number of the runs are going up to about 50 or 60 miles an hour, so it is something to keep an eye on. In fact, across much of southern and central Britain, these plots are suggesting that it could be very windy through this period. Well, the snow risk, how's it looking? Wednesday, the 8th of March, this is when snow falls across southern Britain. I'm going to run the Météo France model here, just to illustrate where it takes the snow track, because it tends to be quite accurate in my experience. So it's starting at 18 GMT, Tuesday the 7th. The blue shading to the south is rain. That moves northeastwards across southern counties, and it turns to sleet or snow on its northern edge. But the extent of the snow isn't really great on this model run. I think a couple of centimetres in places would be likely, but it looks quite marginal. That clears away, and then into Wednesday, more rain moves across the south. It turns to snow for a time, then it's rain again, and the snow risk really becomes focused on central counties as we go into Thursday, and then progressively northwards later on. Snow depths, well, this is the GFS forecast chart for 15 GMT, Wednesday the 8th. It's the model which the animation was based on, and taken at face value, there's a lot of snow in southern England and southern Wales. The yellow shading there indicating up to about 15 centimetres in these places. GFS does have a tendency to vastly overstate snow depths, at least in the UK and in my experience. So let's look at a couple more charts. On the left is the high resolution UK Met Office UKV model. On the right, the German DWD icon. I suspect these two are going to be closer to the mark. The UKV has the emphasis in the southeastern corner there, where up to 12 centimetres of snow has been shown at 22 GMT, Wednesday the 8th. The icon has the snow mostly a bit further west, or at least the thickest covering, up to about 6 centimetres there in parts of central and southwestern England. It's difficult to really say which of these is going to be closer to the mark. The icon has been consistent in recent days. The UKV is a very high resolution model, so you can take your pick. So it's worth looking at the ensemble data, and this is from the UK Met Office MOGREPS-G ensemble. Each of the individual stamps on the plot shows the forecast output from one run, and they are all showing snow depth at 09 GMT, Wednesday the 8th of March. It's notable, obviously there's a lot of snow being shown there in northern Scotland. High degree of confidence in that because we've got those showers peppering that part of the UK. But in the south, there's a lot of variance. Quite a few of these individual runs are showing no snow of significance in southern England. There are a number, though, which have several centimetres. And if I move forwards to The same Mogr Ensemble plot, but for 21 GMT on Wednesday the 8th. It's quite a mixed scenario. Southern Wales, parts of southwestern England, parts of South England are seeing snow on some of these, but it's by no means certain. I think what it's possibly suggesting here is that there may well be a fair amount of snow falling at times in southern Britain through Wednesday, but the accumulations are much less certain. There will be some, probably, in places, but they may not be uniform and widespread. We'll just have to see. It could be quite slushy at times. So several centimetres in parts of southern England look very possible, but the consistency may not be there. How about the northern half of the UK? As I've suggested, it's really the 9th of March onwards as those Atlantic features move up from the southwest and into the northern half of the country. So here's the UKV forecast chart for 12 GMT, Thursday the 9th of March. It's showing significant snow across northern Wales, parts of northern England and into Northern Ireland. If I move forwards to 21 GMT, the snow risk now is pushing northwards, and there's some heavy falls being suggested here in northern England, particularly I would think over high ground, also Northern Ireland. If you see some of the values here in Northern Ireland, close to 30 centimetres, if this is correct. So again, it's likely to be over higher ground, but really is the potential here for significant disruption. Going forwards to 21 GMT Friday, the yellows have now turned red in high parts of Northern England, so the Pennines and parts of Scotland, even Northern Ireland too. Very, very large accumulations of snow are being suggested by this model run. Even the UKV snow depth forecast charts are, in my own opinion, quite suspect. I think snow depth forecast charts from all computer models are open to doubt, but the general trend is clear, and that is very heavy snow is very possible in the north. Going forwards to Saturday, some snow is now being shown in Wales, and it's at this point where that colder air could be at least briefly returning southwards. Lots of snow still in the north. I think there will be quite a few roads which are impacted by this, so hopefully not too many people are going to end up stranded. Don't travel if you don't have to, and keep up to date with the short range forecasts through this period. Well, that's the snow situation. What about precipitation amounts in general? Days 0 to 5, total precipitation forecast from the ECM model on the left, the GFS on the right. So what this is showing is total precipitation. It's not bothered whether it's rain, sleet or snow. It's quite a wet picture in parts of southern England as those disturbances move up. Also, there are significant amounts of precipitation further north into central regions according to the ECM and on the GFS into northeastern areas. Going forward though to the 0 to 10 day period, I think this is probably these are the more significant charts because they do indicate fairly large totals in all parts of the UK. So by this point, a lot of the precipitation, even in the north, will probably be fallen as rain, and the large totals should help to be filling up the reservoirs because it has been very dry recently. So personally, I won't be welcoming this rain, but I suspect a lot of people and water companies in particular will be. Well, how do the deterministic models compare with each other towards the end of the first week? Here is the GFS, Tuesday the 14th of March. An Atlantic flow really at this point. Colder air still in northern Scotland, as can be seen on the chart on the right hand side, which shows the zoomed in view across the UK. Temperatures at about 1500 metres above sea level on both of these plots. It's an unsettled or changeable pattern. The Canadian model, a little bit different, but the broad scale theme is similar. It's unsettled. There's quite a nasty area of low pressure there moving across the UK, and the possibility of cold Arctic air sweeping down again as it clears away eastwards. And the German icon, Atlantic flow dominating things there. The European ECM, a similar story to the icon really. The Atlantic has the upper hand, cold air just restricted to northern Scotland at this point. And finally, the UK Met Office global model, it's a similar story. Low pressure moving across the UK, cold air possibly still in northern Scotland. Unsettled towards the end of the first week, showers, longer spells of rain, the potential at least for it to be quite windy. Snow really confined to Scotland and especially high ground in Scotland, milder in southern and central regions. But all in all, it's a wintry first week. There's the snow, the severe frosts in the north, the risk of strong winds and heavy rain as well in southern and central regions. How does week 2 shape up? Well, it's all about trends and probabilities, of course, at this range, as I always say. And I'll start with a 16-day GEFS plot for London. Air mass temperatures across the top. The signal's fairly clear, and it's suggesting that they will be a little bit below the average, at least for the first 4 or 5 days. The thick purple line is the Ensemble mean, and it's staying below the thick black line, the 30-year average. But with that said, there are a few much milder runs in the mix. In fact, the thick green line, which shows much milder air returning, in fact, almost quite a warm air mass, is the GFS operational run. So that's the run which the initial sequence was based on, but I only ran it out for the first 7 or 8 days. This is going further ahead. It is an outlier, I think, by this point, but as I say, there are a couple of runs which support it to a certain degree. In terms of rain, well, plenty of spikes there early on, so it's quite wet, but perhaps turning drier later. There are fewer spikes showing up towards the end. Also towards the end there, the thick purple line does climb a little bit above the thick black line, so as well as potentially turning drier, maybe, it could also be turning a little bit warmer as well. Here are the 2-metre temperatures shown in the data table for London once more. Light green dominating early on, 6 to 10 Celsius maximums, but as we go through week 2, there is more yellow showing up, and towards the end there, a little bit of orange as well. Those are runs going for maximums between 16 and 20 Celsius. Early on, temperatures therefore close to, perhaps maybe a little bit below the average. We are heading into the middle part of March now, so 6 Celsius would be below the typical daytime values in London at this time of year. Towards the end though, potentially, as I say, becoming milder, or even 1 or 2 runs indicating it becoming quite warm for the time of year, the 16 to 20 Celsius ones. Up to Manchester, it's a similar story really. The air temperature profile very much resembles the London one, as does the precipitation profile across the bottom. Quite a few spikes early on, then number decreasing later. The snow row values are a little higher, 13 at the start of week 2, 10 a few days later. The maximum value it can take is 33, so 10 indicates just less than a 1 in 3 chance of snow falling, not necessarily accumulating. So through week 2, snow isn't out of a question in northwestern England, but it's less likely than it is earlier in the period. So temperatures probably trending upwards, and that is illustrated by the data table here for Manchester. Light greens increasing as we go through the period, also the yellows starting to increase in number towards the end there, very similar to how it was on the London chart. Up to Glasgow, to the northwest of the UK, air temperatures really staying significantly below the 30-year norm, according to most of the runs in the Ensemble for the first 5 days or so. It's just at the end there where they tick up. Number of rain and snow spikes decreases towards the end a little bit, but perhaps not as much as on the Manchester and London plots. and the snow row values are somewhat higher, 15, 12, still 13 and 10 as we head deep into the second week. So the chance of snow greater in the northwest, but still lower than it was earlier on. So quite a mixed picture there being suggested by the Ensemble data, but if anything, temperatures trending upwards through the second week, and after that wet start, it could be pointing towards a growing chance of drier periods later on. The 2 metre temperature data table for Glasgow really just reinforces the message. Dark greens dominating early on, so runs going for between 1 and 5 Celsius, but then through the second half of the second week, the light green becomes dominant. The 6 to 10 Celsius runs, there's even a little bit of yellow and orange towards the end. The GEFS 10-day mean surface level pressure plot using the Ensemble mean for Friday the 17th of March points towards low pressure being somewhere close to the UK, milder air likely into southern and central parts, the chance of it being colder still in the north as I've been discussing. And the ECM comparable plots show something similar, maybe a little bit different, low pressure centred further west perhaps, and the milder air may be covering all parts of the UK at this point. Finally, the mean surface level pressure data tables going forwards through time rather than being a static snapshot like the last two charts were. The one on the left is for London, the one on the right for Edinburgh, both generated using data from the GEFS. The trend is for pressure to be rising a little bit later on. There's more yellow and orange through the last 3 or 4 days than the first three or 4 days. And it's a similar theme on the Edinburgh plot, but at a slightly lower level. Taking them together, it suggests that high pressure by this stage will be centred to the southwest of the UK, rather than to the north. So transitioning back from that negative North Atlantic oscillation pattern, which we have early on in the forecast period with high pressure to the northwest, low pressure to the southwest, to a positive one with high pressure becoming focused on southern and southwestern parts of the UK as perhaps it starts to build in from the Azores or even continental Europe, and low pressure reverting towards Iceland. So to summarise, week 1, it's a cold and wintry start. Sleet and snow are expected in parts of the south on the 8th, accumulations in places, some uncertainty as I've discussed about the northern extent of that snow and the amounts which are likely to settle. Through Thursday and onwards, so from the 9th, the snow risk spreads northwards. Heavy and disruptive falls are very much on the cards. In southern and central regions, so milder air returns, so rain falls instead of snow, and it could become very windy at times. Week 2, predominantly unsettled. There is still a risk of snow in the north. Temperatures fluctuate, probably below average early on, especially in the north, but towards the end they start to pick up and it possibly becomes quite mild in all regions once more. The chance of drier spells increases towards the end of the period, but that is a long way off. The signal at this stage is for pressure to be rising, high pressure to become more influential, but it's not particularly strong at this stage, and that may still change considerably. So there we have it. It's a very wintry start to the forecast period. Much of the UK is likely to see snow, at least for a time. In the south, the focus is on Wednesday. Several centimetres possible, but it would be very interesting to see how it does play out. Then from Thursday onwards, that snow risk moves northwards, and that really is a part of the UK where there is the likelihood of significant disruption. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this forecast and found it useful. If you did, then please remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons below. Thanks very much for watching now. Bye.